Hello folks, welcome to the Canal Channel Jose. Today we're going to give you an idea how to replace the light bolts in the dash on the 91 to 94 Toyota Tercel. And with that, we're going to be removing the steering wheel to extract the cluster so we can replace the light bolts and show you completely where they're located at and how you can do it, or get an idea how you can do it. And with that said, well, let's get started. Okay folks, so far what we have done is we recommend you disconnecting your battery when you're doing this procedure, because you want to disconnect your airbag but you don't want to activate it. So you disconnect your battery, and once you do that, then you use a T30 socket to remove the bolts that hold the airbag on the steering wheel. And there's two covers, one on each side, that you remove, plastic covers, and then you use the T30 to loosen the bolts that are right here, and those hold the airbag into the structure of the steering wheel. Once you do that, remove the airbag and you disconnected it, you disconnect your horn, and then you put your extractor for the steering wheel. And once you got it secure and you're about to loosen it, what you do is you put it straight. So when you're gonna put it back on, you put it straight, and that way the steering wheel is lined up with your wheels. And then right now what we have left to do is we just gotta turn this bolt to extract our steering wheel, and that way we can start getting to the cluster. So it's quite a procedure to get to that cluster. So with that, let's extract our steering wheel. So now we have to take out 4 screws that are hidden on the bottom of the shelf, and there's 4 Phillips screws. We take them off so we can split these plastics and extract them so we can start getting to the cluster. So now that we have loosened and taken off the bolts of the screws, we take the bottom piece. Okay folks, so now that we have removed everything around it, that cluster is the last thing, so we can remove that screw and that screw right there, and the screw that goes right there, and there's a Phillips screws. We remove all those 3 and we can remove the cluster. One thing that if you have one of our viewers advises that we can remove the speedometer cable into the transmission, so we can pull it this way. That way we can pull it more outwards and we can play on taking it out from the speedometer. So we're gonna do that, and then that we disconnect the electrical from the cluster so we can extract it and we can replace the light bolts. So now with the speedometer cable disconnected from the transmission, we can tilt it in an angle, or we can bring it in an angle and we can fit our hand behind it to disconnect that cable from this side and disconnect it from the cluster, and then continue with the electrical. Otherwise, if you don't disconnect it from the transmission, you're gonna have trouble getting your hand between here trying to disconnect the cluster speedometer cable when it's connected on the transmission. So now we have a good opening here to disconnect it. So now that we have the speedometer disconnected from the transmission, we can see the back of the cluster and disconnect the speedometer cable from the cluster, and then continue with the electrical. So we have a good opening right here. So now here is the back of our cluster. So this is four light bulbs that we have to replace. 1, 2, 3, 4, and those light bulbs, we're gonna replace them with the LEDs. We take them off, we put the LEDs back on, and then before we start putting everything back on and then secure it, we're gonna make sure that they all light up. So that way we put everything back on, and then we don't find out the LED needs to be flipped because they got sides. They require positive, negative on their own, on their perspective side. So with that said, let's get these 4 light bulbs out and then replace them with LEDs and test them out. Now that we have put our LEDs on, we're gonna connect it into the dash, and then we're gonna turn on the lights and see if all the lights turn on. If all the lights turn on, that means that no light bulb needs to be taken out and flipped because they got their size on the positive and negative. So now with that said, we'll connect it to the wiring on this side and see if they all turn on. So we verified that all 4 light bulbs light up, so we have to swap one, and now we can, as you can see, all the light bulbs are good. So now we can start putting our everything back on as it was. So we start connecting our wirings and our speedometer. So now that we have put the dash back on, we connected the electrical, the speedometer, we put it back on, we connected it in the transmission, the speedometer. So we verified that the lights turn on, everything's good. So now we can start putting everything back on, because if we find out that something's not on right, then we have to take everything apart again and then put it right, and then you don't want to go through that process again. So we just find out that everything's working properly, we put everything back on. So now we verified that everything's lighting up, and then we have put the screws that hold the cluster towards the frame, and then we put the plastic that goes around it with the 2 screws on it. We plug in our emergency lights on, and then we put in and we put the knob on the dimmer. We are putting the top piece, and then we're gonna put the bottom piece on it, and then we can continue putting on the steering wheel and then the airbag. So now what we have done is we put the steering wheel back on after we tighten those 2 plastics on the column, and then we make sure that the airbag wire comes in straight in this way. You gotta line up the 2 arrows here on the bottom, and then we plug in our horn. This is the horn, and then we can put the nut that tightens the steering wheel to the column. So that's the last thing we gotta do. We put that nut. So now what we have done is we put our airbag back on, we tighten it with a T30 socket, and then secure it to the steering wheel. At the same time, we tested it that it works. So now all we have to do is put the plastics that cover the openings for the bolt, for the airbag, and then now we can compare it to what we had in the beginning on the LEDs with the conventional, and that should finish the replacement on those light bulbs. Okay folks, these are the conventional light bulbs in, so we're gonna replace them with LEDs and see the differences between this one, the conventional, and the LEDs. So now let's compare the LEDs, oh wow, to the conventionals. The conventionals were giving us some light up, and then we had one burn out towards the gas level indicator. So now we have a really good illumination with the LEDs. Well, folks, this was an idea how to replace the light bulbs in an 91 to 94 Toyota Tercel. We wanted to give you an idea how to replace those light bulbs on the dash for a 91 to 94 Toyota Tercel. So with that said, for those folks who haven't subscribed to our channel, please subscribe. If you like this video, give us thumbs up, share it, and we'll see you soon with more videos here in el canal El Chano Jose.